I need to find myself, she said, as her GPS quietly rerouted to her ex's apartment. She blocked me and baptized her grid with healing quotes. I kept my peace. 2 months later, she unblocked. First thing she saw, me and a different hand in mine on a Paris street. I'm Aaron, 31, product ops by day, weekend sourdough guy by accident. I liked quiet routines, the same coffee mug, the same podcast on the commute, the same arm of the couch where my girlfriend, Marley, would tuck her feet under my leg and tell me about her students. 3 years of steady. We had a calendar on the fridge with color-coded plans, an apartment plant that finally stayed alive, and a list titled Someday that had cities, dogs, and the word house. It ended on a Tuesday that felt like a library. We sat on the gray couch we bought on a holiday sale, and Marley folded her hands like she was at a job interview. She said she needed space to figure out what I really want, the way people say they read taking time off social right before posting 10 stories a day. She spoke gently, like she was handing me a fragile object and not a grenade. I listened because I'd felt the drift before she named it. The late-night texts she turned face down, the sudden girls' weekends with friends I'd never met, the wistful mentions of her ex, Derek, that had shifted from messy but over to, he's actually doing the work. It's funny how the work always means your problem now. I asked the only useful question, what does a break look like? She said it meant we were on pause, free to connect with ourselves, free to see other people if that's part of the journey, but still basically together. Imagine putting a fire on pause and asking the house not to burn. So where are you staying? I asked, careful. Marley blinked. What do you mean? Here. We're adults. I stood up because my legs wanted to tell the truth faster than my mouth. No, I said, calm, not cruel. Break means not together. Not together means not roommates. The lease is my name. I'll have the locks changed tomorrow. She looked at me like I'd suddenly started speaking a dialect that doesn't have a word for maybe. The relief on her face from 2 minutes earlier evaporated and left a panic sheen. You're overreacting, she said. You're punishing me for being honest. I went to the hall closet, pulled out moving boxes, set them in the living room like I was laying out plates. No yelling, just logistics. That night, she tried the whole staircase of strategies. Scoff, blame, bargain, cry. She slept on the couch. I slept in our bed and stared at the ceiling fan until it carved my thoughts into quarters. In the morning, I left early for work and told her a locksmith was coming at 5. You can take whatever's yours. I packed your passport and meds on top. She opened her mouth, closed it, and picked up the first box. On my lunch break, I called the utility companies, the internet provider, the bank. I canceled the supplementary card with her name on it because pause doesn't mean pay. I emailed the landlord to add a note about visitors and keys. I sent Marley a simple text with the storage unit address and a photo of the labeled boxes. Being decisive doesn't need to be dramatic. By 5 on the dot, the locksmith rang. By 6, the apartment was quieter than I remembered it could be. I made an omelet that tasted like a new language and ate it at the counter. On my phone, a notification. You've been blocked by a mindful Marley. Okay, she wanted a stage. I wanted a door that closed. By the time I got to work the next day, Marley's Instagram had shed every photo of me like a snake skin. In their place, grayscale selfies with captions about choosing myself. Slideshows of sunsets overlaid with serif quotes about growth. A boomerang of clinking glasses with strangers tagged the real ones. Her friends formed a digital chorus. So brave, you deserve better, glowing and growing, like they were getting paid in heart emojis. I didn't respond. Not online, not in group chats. Silence isn't pettiness. Sometimes it's the only language that refuses to collaborate with a lie. I boxed the last of her things. A drawer of mugs, a stack of dog-eared novels, a plant I knew would prefer her window, and moved them to the storage unit. I mailed her the key and the invoice like it was any other bill. What I didn't expect was the text from Olivia. She was the outlier in Marley's orbit. Quiet, the kind of person who notices when you refill the Brita without being asked. We'd become accidental friends over years of double dates and shared eye rolls. "Just so you know," she wrote, "Marley's telling people you snapped and kicked her out for no reason." I stared at that sentence until it went fuzzy. "Where is she staying?" I asked. "Derek's." "Went straight there," Olivia replied. "She's high-fiving the universe." There it was. The break wasn't a journey inward, it was a layover with an old destination. I still didn't post. I didn't call our mutuals to submit my side. You can't out-argue an echo chamber. I cleaned the oven instead. Real life makes better use of your hands. A week slid by. The apartment found its new shape. I learned what it sounded like when I wasn't waiting to be interrupted. On Friday, my boss, Priya, called me into her office. A client in Lisbon was mid-crisis. Overruns, missed deadlines, a local partner threatening to pull out. 3 months, she said. High pressure, high visibility. You up for it? I said yes before my mouth remembered to be cautious. On the walk home, I texted Olivia, a half-formed thought turning into a plan. She'd wanted to go to Portugal since forever. Art school fantasies about azulejos and sketches on hilltops. Money and time were always the problem. I told her the company was putting me in a 2-bedroom in Graça. I told her one room would be empty and Lisbon is safer than they make it look in movies. No pressure, just a chance to see the tiles in person. She called instead of texting. "Is this about Marley?" she asked, voice small, honest. "This is about you and a wish you keep postponing," I said, and I meant most of it. "And okay, selfishly, I don't want to eat pastéis de nata alone." She said she'd think. The next morning, a 1-line text. Booked it. Marley kept posting. Ocean waves, forest trails, a carousel of candles with healing spelled in seashells. Olivia didn't comment on any of it. She texted me a picture of a suitcase with a broken wheel and said, "Metaphor?" I offered to pick her up from the airport because some metaphors deserve a ride. On the plane day, I brought a sign that said, "Welcome to Hills and Carbs," because humor makes the landing softer. Olivia laughed at it from 20 feet away and looked like a person stepping out from behind a curtain. We hugged like people do at the start of a trip and at the end of a chapter, and then we climbed Lisbon. Work in Lisbon was the kind that leaves you deliciously tired. Real problems, real fixes, a whiteboard that slowly turns from chaos to map. By day, I negotiated timelines in 2 languages and figured out why a deployment kept failing every 3rd try. By night, Olivia and I learned a city. We let Tram 28 throw us around corners. We ate grilled sardines on paper and argued about which Miraduro had the best view. She voted Senhora do Monte. I said Portas do Sol. We were both right. In museums, Olivia taught me to look longer. "Everyone stares at the center," she said in a low voice near a tiled panel, "but the corners tell you how honest the whole thing is." We started paying attention to corners. In churches, in restaurants, in conversations. It turned out to be a useful life policy. We were careful because carelessness would have made an easy story for anyone who wanted one. Separate rooms, separate alarms. We met up at bakeries and walked like we had a secret that didn't require us to whisper. It wasn't a rebound. It was 2 people who had been background characters in the same show finally getting the microphone and realizing their lines rhyme. In our spare time, we told the truth out loud. Olivia confessed how being Marley's best friend had quietly become a full-time job, emotional cleanup, emergency errands, applause on demand. I told her about the loneliness you can feel sitting 3 inches from someone you love. We weren't venting, we were auditing. Marley S. updates filtered through mutuals. The healing era had pivoted to a short-lived reunion with Derek that crashed into the wall of money and expectations. She moved back in with her parents for a reset. Her captions got vaguer. Her friend group got quieter. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt relieved to be far. One Saturday, I asked Olivia if she wanted to see Sintra or keep doing Lisbon. She chose LX Factory and then made a face when I said I wanted to buy a silly tourist sweatshirt. "Get it," she said. "You need more objectively bad clothing." We took a photo in front of a mural, half accidental, half devout. My hand found hers like it had known the way all along. 2 months in, the project turned. The angry red on the dashboard softened to yellow, and then, gloriously, blue. Priya sent a string of exclamation points and a promise of an obscene bonus if I brought it home on time. I celebrated by spending too much on dinner and eating every bite like proof. On the walk back up the hill, Olivia stopped on a staircase and looked at me like she'd just solved a math problem. "I didn't come here to fall in love," she said, "but I like who I am when I'm with you." I said, "Same." Because life doesn't always need poetry to be true. That night, I re-downloaded an app I hadn't opened in a year. I scrolled through my camera roll, stopped at the mural photo, and thought about captions that didn't make me roll my own eyes. The one I picked wasn't clever. It was honest. Sometimes you have to change countries to find your own voice. I didn't hit post. Not yet. There was one last piece of housekeeping to do. I unblocked Marley on a Wednesday because midweek honesty feels less theatrical. I posted the mural photo of Olivia and me laughing with dumb sweatshirts in the frame, the tag set to Lisbon. The caption is plain as toast. Then I put my phone on the counter and made coffee because caffeine makes even good choices feel more official. 4 minutes later. What? Then, who is she? Where are you? Then the flood. Punctuation, taking it personally. Accusations drafted in a hurry. Is that Olivia? My Olivia? My best friend? Are you actually psychotic? The irony attempted to bench press the sun. I didn't answer. You can't repair a house by arguing with mold. I forwarded the messages to a folder labeled Paper Trail because my future is a fan of receipts. Then I went to a meeting where a Portuguese engineer named Rui explained a clever fix involving a load balancer and patience. It was a good day. Marley escalated. She called her parents and tried to set the forest on fire. Olivia was ready. She'd already told them everything she needed to. The months of Marley S. overlap with Derek, the break as a bridge, the years of friendship that were actually servitude. Hard conversations are better delivered early. Next came the office move I'd predicted in a worst-case scenario doc. A long email to HR painting me as a manipulative boss who used a company trip to lure a vulnerable young woman overseas. I had already briefed Priya before I left the States about my personal life going sideways, the existence of boundaries, and the fact that Olivia was a friend, not an employee or contractor. Also, the project performance chart spoke fluent defense. Legal sent Marley a letter with sentences I wouldn't want to receive. HR thanked me for transparency and told me to send any further contact their way. Priya texted, "Proud of how you handled this. Also, stop buying sweatshirts." I texted back a photo of a new sweatshirt with a tile pattern because authority thrives on being ignored gently. Olivia got her own wave of digital fury, paragraphs about betrayal typed at highway speed. She replied once carefully, "I wish you well. I'm done explaining myself to someone who never actually listened." Then she muted and took a photo of a pastel de nata in sunlight as her way of reinventing the concept of peace. The thing about building a narrative is that you can do it on a foundation of things that didn't happen. Marley's circle, once an echo chamber, developed ears. Screenshots travel faster than alibis. By the end of the week, her posts had dwindled to a quote about releasing what no longer serves me, which, unintentionally, finally tracked. That night, Olivia and I walked to the castle and watched the city turn gold. I felt the specific relief of a person who stopped volunteering for a job no one asked them to have. Fixer of someone else's chaos. "What now?" she asked. I said, "We go home when the work is done, and then we build something we don't have to apologize for." It sounded like a plan because it was. A year later, we live on the other side of town in a narrow house with too many plants and a table that never stays fully clean because there's always flour or pencil shavings on it. Olivia claimed the brightest corner of the second bedroom for a studio. Morning light hits her paper and turns pencils into wands. I fixed the squeaky floorboard in the hallway, not because it was unbearable, but because I wanted to learn how to make something quiet. Our lives have this tone now, less about emergencies, more about maintenance. Work put my Lisbon project on a slide at the all-hands. Turnaround of the year. Priya asked me to talk for 3 minutes about what changed the outcome. I didn't mention heartbreak. I talked about scope and boundaries like they were tools, not vibes. How saying no early is cheaper than fixing yes later. I watched heads nod in the way people do when the metaphor accidentally lands on their home life. Afterward, a teammate stopped me at the espresso machine and said, "That talk saved me from agreeing to a 3-month death march." I said, "Me too," and meant a different project entirely. Olivia's parents come by twice a month. They bring fruit and leave with containers they swear they'll return and then don't, which is how you know we're family. Her father tells the same joke about me becoming Portuguese because I buy olive oil by the liter. Her mother insists on doing the dishes until Olivia physically redirects her to the couch. They ask about our next trip. We send them photos of our boring Sundays, groceries, laundry, a walk, with the kind of pride usually reserved for graduations. We kept a few Lisbon rituals because some habits earn citizenship. Once a week, we make coffee intentionally bad on the front steps and drink it like we read 22 and broke. We look at the corners of our house the way Olivia taught me to look at tile panels. "Corners tell you if the whole thing is honest," she says, tapping drywall that we both know is hiding an ugly pipe. We keep the corners honest. When they're not, we say so before the paint dries. The Marley weather report still reaches me now, and then the way news about a city you moved away from finds you. She bounced through a short-lived something with a guy who wanted a fan, not a partner. Her public posts went from megaphone to whisper. I didn't feel triumphant. Relief is not gloating, it's a door closing without fingers in it. She tried a paper letter once, actual stationery, looping handwriting like an apology written on Instagram captions. It said she was finding herself and sorry if it hurt. The if sat there like a coffee ring on a table you just cleaned. I placed the letter in a folder with the HR email and the screen grabs, a paper museum of a life I no longer curate. I didn't reply, not cold, just finished. One Saturday in early spring, we were leaving the hardware store with an absurd number of hooks, because apparently every wall needs one, and we ran into her. Marley. A coincidence with a shopping cart. She looked the same but less confident in her edges. She reached for a hug, and I gave her a polite half one because you can be kind without reopening doors. We made small talk that was both civilized and useless. She said, "You look good." I said, "I am." She glanced at Olivia, did quick mental math, and asked for coffee sometime to clear the air. I told her, the air's already clear. Not a line, a boundary. We parted like two people at different gates. That night, I half expected the old chemical of anger to fizz in my blood. Nothing fizzed. I made dinner and oversalted the chickpeas and laughed about it. Olivia drew little diagrams of hooks on index cards because she refuses to trust my eyeballing. The house learned another minor skill. Derek messaged once, out of nowhere, one of those slippery texts that pretend to be about closure and somehow still audition you for a future argument. I didn't bite. I didn't to co-author a narrative where I got cast as either the villain or the support group. You can decline to be a character in someone else's story. It's free and it saves time. Olivia had her first small show at a neighborhood gallery. She hung drawings from Lisbon, doorways and laundry lines, the tram turning a corner, tiles that looked like math and music forgot to be separate. People came. The room made that soft murmur of strangers meeting a friend you made alone. I watched her talk about paperweight and shadow like it was weather. When someone asked what inspired the series, she said, learning to look longer. I felt something inside me sit down and breathe. We went back to Lisbon once, briefly, because Rui wanted to show off a server closet he'd finally convinced the budget to modernize. We ate sardines on paper and argued about the best Miraduro again because traditions keep their shape. We bought a small ring dish with blue tiles from a vendor who wrapped it like it was glass and a secret. On the flight home, Olivia slept with her mouth open a little, and I took a picture because love is half documentation and half refrain. I didn't plan a spectacle. I'm not a spectacle person. The proposal was a Tuesday in the kitchen. Flour on the counter because the sourdough starter was finally behaving. Music low, the ring in the tile dish like it belonged there and always had. "Do you want to keep building?" I asked, which is my version of poetry. Olivia blinked tears like she didn't trust them at first and said yes like a sentence she de-practiced in her bones. We told our parents. We told Priya, who demanded calendar leads for the time off. We drafted a tiny list. No aisle, no audience math. A backyard, a short promise, good food, and people who like to help stack chairs. My sister asked if we'd invite Marley. It wasn't rude. It was a logistical question from a person who hates gossip. "No," I said, "because our vows don't need a fact-checker, and because us being the bigger person isn't it the same thing as forgetting what you learned." I didn't need the moral high ground. I needed an event where the corners were honest. Olivia did one more hard thing before the save the dates. She met two of the women from Marley's old circle for coffee. Not to argue, to say kindly, "I choose a different workload. Friendship shouldn't feel like unpaid overtime." They took it surprisingly well. One said she'd suspected as much and was relieved someone finally said it out loud. The other cried, then texted later to apologize for crying, then asked about our favorite Portuguese bakery because she was visiting Lisbon in the fall. Endings are messy. They're also beginnings with different shoes. Around the house, I keep finding new evidence that we're rebuilding something that doesn't require a stage manager. Notes to each other on the whiteboard. "Out of cumin, don't forget the drill battery, proud of you today." We argue about serious things. Money, time, whether the living room needs another plant. And we argue like we are on the same team deciding how to beat the opposing coach. Entropy. Every so often, someone asks if posting that Lisbon photo was petty. Maybe a little. Or maybe it was a log entry, proof of life filed publicly so the future had context. If you're being rewritten elsewhere, you're allowed to publish the original. You don't have to fight about it. You just have to sign your name. Here is the part I couldn't have articulated on that first quiet Tuesday when Marley asked for space. Space isn't a hotel room you book with someone else's card. If someone asked for a break while keeping your lease, your calendar, and your heart on autopay, that's not a search. That's staging. You're allowed to shut off the lights and lock up. Love is not scored by how much disrespect it can absorb without making a sound. And this, love, when it's good, isn't a scavenger hunt with moving clues. It's a build. It needs land you both stand on, plans you both can read, permits you both agreed to pull, and the humility to fix what you mismeasured without assigning blame like it's a chore chart. With Olivia, loads are balanced, corners are checked, and the punch list actually gets shorter. The night after we told our families, Olivia fell asleep on the couch under a blanket I swear grows heavier in winter. I stayed up a little longer and scrolled photos from the last year. The dumb tile sweatshirt, the server closet that finally looked like the future, the ring dish catching morning sun, my hand next to hers on a staircase we used to climb dead tired. I thought about how far a person can travel without crossing an ocean when they stop carrying things that don't belong to them. When I turned out the lights, the house hummed the way houses do. Pipes, neighbors, the quiet breath of a place that holds you. I remembered the exact sentence Olivia said in the museum that first week. "Everyone stares at the center. The corners tell you how honest it is." We don't stare at centerpieces anymore. We check corners. We keep them clean. And when they get dusty, we don't post about healing. We get the broom. Marley asked for space. I gave her miles. By the time she finished the performance, I wasn't waiting at the door. I was somewhere else entirely. making bad coffee on purpose, fixing a floorboard, saying yes to a build that doesn't need an audience to feel real.